Two conversations happened at Indian Wells in the space of 48 hours this week that, when you put them next to each other, tell you almost everything worth knowing about the state of professional tennis right now and where it is heading. The first was Alexander Zverev, the world number 3, sitting in a press conference after his third-round win over Brandon Nakashima and offering what may be the most brutally honest assessment of the Alcaraz and Sinner problem that any rival has delivered all season. The second was João Fonseca, a 19-year-old Brazilian ranked 35th in the world, walking off Stadium 1 after demolishing Tommy Paul 6-2, 6-3, and being told he would face Jannik Sinner in the fourth round. He said he was going to try to win. These are the two sides of the same conversation that men's tennis has been having with itself since Alcaraz and Sinner took over the top of the sport. Zverev represents the current generation's honest reckoning with what the gap actually is. Fonseca represents the next generation's refusal to accept it as permanent. Zverev was asked in his press conference about tennis IQ, specifically which players on the current tour demonstrate the highest tennis intelligence and whether tactical sophistication is what separates the best from everyone else. His answer was unexpected enough that it stopped the room. He said he has a different opinion from the commonly held one. He said the players who win the most are those with the best shots, full stop. He then said something about Alcaraz and Sinner that went further than any of his previous assessments of the two players above him in the rankings. Alcaraz and Sinner win more than anyone, not because they play with many tactics, but because their shots are simply better than everyone else's. I think that 10 years ago, tactics and tennis IQ were more important than they are now. I think they have lost some value. Nowadays, whoever hits the ball the best wins the most matches. That is Alexander Zverev, the third best player in the world by ranking, a Grand Slam finalist and a player who has been competing at the very top of the sport for a decade, saying that the reason he cannot beat Alcaraz and Sinner consistently is not that they outthink him, it is that they simply hit the ball better. The intellectual honesty in that statement is significant because it removes every tactical explanation, every coaching variable, every mental edge theory that might otherwise create the impression the gap is closable through preparation and game planning alone. He is saying the shots are better. The forehand is better, the backhand is better, the serve is better, the return is better. And in the modern game, where the physical power of the baseline exchange has reached a level that previous generations would not have recognized, those qualities are more decisive than they have ever been. He also offered a historical observation that adds a layer to the point. He said he believed that 10 years ago, tactics and tennis IQ were more important than they are now, and that they have lost some value. That is not a nostalgic complaint about the direction the sport has taken. It is a structural observation about what the physical evolution of the game has done to the strategic layer that previously sat on top of it. In the era when the baseline rally was slower and the margins between a good shot and a winner were wider, the player who positioned better, who managed the point with greater intelligence, who knew when to attack and when to construct, had a meaningful advantage over a player who simply hit harder. Zverev is saying that advantage has diminished. The shots are now so powerful that the window between setting up a winner and hitting one has effectively closed, and the player who wins that exchange is simply the one whose shot is better. Alcaraz and Sinner hit the best shots. Therefore, they win the most matches. It is worth sitting with the specific implications of that observation for a player like Zverev himself. He has spent his entire career developing a tennis intelligence that is widely considered among the sharpest on the tour. His shot selection, his ability to read the court, his understanding of when to come forward and when to stay back, and his capacity to adjust tactically within a match are qualities that every serious analyst of the game has praised across his decade at the top level. He won Olympic gold in Tokyo. He reached the US Open final in 2020. He has beaten Federer, Nadal, Djokovic, Murray, and most of the significant players of the last decade across his career. His tennis IQ, the very quality that the questioner in his press conference was asking about, is genuinely elite. And his honest conclusion, delivered in a press conference at Indian Wells in March 2026, is that those tactical qualities are not enough to close the gap to the two players above him, because the game has evolved to a plane where shot quality is the decisive variable, and not the quality of the thinking that shapes its use. He cannot outthink what cannot be outthought. The specific irony is that Zverev has spent the last 12 months trying to respond to precisely this reality by changing his own game. He has been playing significantly more aggressively than in previous seasons, taking the ball earlier, shortening points, attacking more frequently from positions further inside the baseline. Sinner mentioned it in his own Indian Wells interview this week, saying that Zverev playing much more aggressively was the kind of development worth paying attention to. What Zverev's press conference comments revealed is that the shift in his approach is not a tactical experiment. It is the logical conclusion of the honest assessment he delivered in public on Sunday. If shots are what determine matches now, then the path forward is to produce more aggressive and more powerful shots, to take the ball before the opponent can impose their pace, and to shorten the time available for the tactical layer to make itself felt. His game evolution and his diagnosis of the problem are built on the same foundation. Fonseca arrived in this conversation from a completely different direction. He is 19 years old, born in Rio de Janeiro, and has been on the professional tour's radar since his junior years when he won the Junior Australian Open title. He turned professional at 16 and has developed at a pace that has consistently surprised even those who rated him highly in the junior circuit. He won the next-gen ATP finals last year, following in the specific footsteps of both Alcaraz and Sinner, who each won that title in their own breakthrough seasons before ascending to the very top of the sport. The historical pattern of next-gen winners going on to become elite senior players is not guaranteed, but it is strong enough that the comparison carries weight. He also won the Basel Open 500 in October, a result produced against a field that included multiple top 20 players in one of the more competitive indoor hardcourt draws of the autumn season. Coming into Indian Wells, his 2026 season had not reflected the expectations the Basel title had generated. He arrived having won just one match across 3 tournaments, his ranking having slipped from his career high of 24th to outside the top 30. The California desert has produced a completely different story. He saved 2 match points at 6-4 in the second set tiebreak to beat Karen Khachanov in the second round, coming back to win 4-6, 7-6, 6-4 in a match that required the kind of mental composure that many players his age do not find in those specific situations. He then went out on Stadium 1 and beat Tommy Paul 6-2, 6-3, breaking Paul's serve twice in the first set, recovering from an early deficit in the second to sweep 6 of the next 7 games, and producing a performance that several courtside observers described as the most convincing of his season to date. He is now 7-1 against top 30 players since September, a record that includes wins over Tsitsipas, Rublev, Khachanov, Paul, and several others across multiple surfaces and tournament levels. He is the first Brazilian to reach the 4th round at Indian Wells since Tonas Bellucci in 2012. When asked about what awaited him in the 4th round, Fonseca did not produce the kind of deflection that younger players often offer when confronted with the gap between where they are and where the very top players operate. He was honest about the scale of the challenge, warm in his admiration for both Sinner and Alcaraz, and then completely straightforward about his intentions. He said he was going to try to put as much pressure as he could and play like he had been playing. He said it was a pleasure to face those players and a really big thing. But he also said something that cuts to the heart of what makes him an interesting prospect, rather than just a good young player. He said he was going to try to enjoy his time on court and see where his game is and what it is that those players do that makes them so difficult to beat. He framed the match against Sinner as both a competition and a diagnostic. He wants to win it, he also wants to learn from it. Those two things are not in conflict for him, and the ability to hold both at once is a quality that the best players in the sport tend to share. He also said that if people think he can be there competing with Alcaraz and Sinner, he tries to take it as a privilege rather than as pressure. That is a mature response from a 19-year-old who has been compared to both players since before he had won a professional title, and it reflects the same calm self-possession that Alcaraz displayed at a similar age, when comparisons to the Big Three were arriving before he had completed his first full season on the tour. The tactical picture for the Sinner and Fonseca fourth-round match is genuinely interesting when you look at it closely. Sinner enters the match with a 101-8 record on outdoor hard courts since the start of 2024, one of the most dominant surface records in the modern era. He has beaten Shapovalov 6-3, 6-2 and Svercina 6-1, 6-1 in his previous 2 rounds without dropping a set. He is the heavy favorite by every available measure. Fonseca's best path to causing a genuine problem involves the variation in ball heights that has historically troubled Sinner more than any other tactical approach. Alcaraz has repeatedly used heavy, high-bouncing balls to push Sinner behind the baseline and force him to hit at shoulder height rather than at his preferred contact point at the waist. Fonseca has the forehand power and the serve to generate that kind of pressure, and his 10% slice usage rate against Paul suggests he has the variety to disrupt Sinner's rhythm across a full match rather than just in isolated exchanges. Whether he can sustain that disruption for long enough to win 3 sets against the world number 2 is a different question. Sinner's experience in pressure situations, his ability to absorb an opponent's best level in the early stages of a match, and then impose his own game as the match progresses, is precisely what makes him so difficult to beat over a full 3-set contest. He has been through the kind of match Fonseca would need to produce, the high-intensity, high-variance match where the tactical plan has to hold for 2 hours, many times, and knows exactly how to manage the psychology of facing an opponent playing with nothing to lose. Fonseca, who has not yet faced a top-5 player in his career, is about to find out what that feels like from the other side of the net for the first time. What makes Tuesday's match at Indian Wells genuinely significant beyond the result it produces is the question it begins to answer. The same question that Zverev raised in his press conference when he said the shots are simply better. If the gap between the 2 players at the top and everyone else is as structural and as physical as Zverev described, then a 19-year-old reaching a round of 16 at a Masters 1000 and putting pressure on Sinner for even a set or 2 is a data point worth more than the scoreline. It tells you something about whether the next generation has the raw material to eventually close a gap that the current generation, by Zverev's own admission, cannot. Fonseca said after beating Paul that from where he wants to be, top 1 or top 5 in the world, and winning Grand Slams, this kind of match will become more usual. He said it calmly, without performance, as someone stating a fact about the future rather than making a promise about it. Whether he is right is what matches like the one coming on Tuesday are in the business of determining. If you want to give me your prediction on Sinner versus Fonseca, drop it in the comments. I want to know whether you think Fonseca takes a set. The connection between what Zverev said and what Fonseca represents is actually the most interesting thread in both conversations. Zverev said the shots are simply better than everyone else's. He said this not as an excuse or a concession, but as an accurate description of what the technical reality of facing Alcaraz and Sinner feels like from inside a professional tennis match. What Fonseca's Indian Wells run is beginning to suggest is that the 19-year-old from Rio de Janeiro might be the player whose shots are naturally closer to that standard than anyone else currently outside the top 5. His forehand is not the careful, structured groundstroke of a player who has been coached to hit it safely. It is a shot hit with the kind of explosive, confident pace that produces outright winners from positions that most players would use to construct rather than to close. His serve, which he has spoken about as an area of significant development this season, has already produced performances where it gave top 20 players nothing to work with on the return. And his ability to absorb pressure in situations where lesser young players retreat, the Khachanov match point saves being the most visible example, suggests a psychological infrastructure capable of handling the moments that decisive matches at the highest level are built around. Whether his shots are better than Sinner's on Tuesday is the specific question the match will answer. Almost nobody outside his own coaching team believes they currently are, but the question itself, which could not have been asked about any other 19-year-old on the current tour with the same seriousness, is already a statement about where Fonseca sits in the conversation about the future of the sport. Zverev told the press conference what the gap is. Fonseca walked off Stadium 1 a day later and said he was going to try to close it. Both things can be true at the same time, and Tuesday at Indian Wells is where the reality of the gap meets the ambition of the challenger for the first time in their careers. If you want to give me your prediction on Sinner versus Fonseca, drop it in the comments. I want to know whether you think Fonseca takes a set. One final thing worth noting from Fonseca's press conference on Sunday night is what he said when the comparisons to Alcaraz and Sinner came up directly. He said that if people think he can be there competing with both of them, he tries to take it as a privilege rather than as pressure. He said people are saying he has the game and the level, and that he is just going to keep working and try to do the best he can to achieve what he wants to achieve. He said he is a chill and calm guy who just tries to take positive things from those situations. That specific combination of genuine ambition and genuine calm is the quality that the best players in the sport tend to carry when they are still young enough that the expectations have not yet fully settled on their shoulders. Alcaraz had it at 19. Sinner had it at a similar age. Whether Fonseca sustains it across the years required to reach the levels Zverev described, where the shots are simply better than everyone else's, is the long-term question that Tuesday's match at Indian Wells will begin.